Today we're going to continue talking about the digestive system. The goal of this video is to discuss the structures of the mouth and esophagus and explain what role these play in the digestive process. Okay, so let's begin by thinking about the differences between children's teeth and adult teeth. So toddlers have only 20 teeth compared to an adult's 32 teeth. The incisors come in first when the child's about 6 to 8 months old, followed by the canines and molars. Even after these teeth are replaced with permanent teeth, molars come in during teens and early 20s. Okay, but there are other digestive structures found in the mouth. There are the salivary glands, which produce saliva, and your saliva contains 99% water, or 99% of the saliva is water. But also there's mucus, which lubricates food for swallowing. There's amylase, which breaks down starch. That's an enzyme that breaks down starch. There are lysozymes, which kill bacteria in your saliva. There are antibodies, which mark any foreign invaders. And I'll also mention here your saliva is produced by these 3 glands. So these are all considered your salivary glands, but there are 3 different ones. There's the parotid gland, the submandibular gland, and the sublingual gland. All right. Your mouth also contains a hard palate. This forms the bony roof of the mouth. So you can see labeled in the image here on the roof of the mouth, that's your hard palate. There's also your soft palate. It forms the rest of your mouth. There is the uvula. This prevents swallowed food from entering the navel. I'm sorry, not your navel, your nasal cavity. And then there's the tongue, which helps push food down towards the esophagus. So now we're going to talk about deglutition. That sounds like a fancy word, but it's a pretty straightforward process, actually. We're going to talk about what happens during deglutition. So deglutition is just swallowing, and this has 2 major phases: the buccal phase and the pharyngeal esophageal phase. So let's talk about the buccal phase first. After chewing, mastication, which is chewing is just that's the term for it, mastication. So after chewing and being mixed with saliva, the food lumps up, and it's called a bolus. It's then forced into the pharynx by your tongue. So your pharynx is back here, and you're going to force the bolus, that lumped up food, into the pharynx using the tongue. And this is a consciously controlled process. Next comes the pharyngeal esophageal phase. So there's a thin flap of skin called the epiglottis that blocks the larynx, and the uvula blocks the nasal cavity, like I mentioned a moment ago. So here's that little flap that's going to block the opening to the larynx. This causes food to travel to your esophagus, so down this tube, instead of into your respiratory system. So sometimes if you're talking when your mouth is open, that flap, the epiglottis, remains open. And if you're talking while you're chewing, food can get down into your larynx, and that's basically your windpipe, and that's how you can get choked, actually. So best not to talk with your while you're chewing. Okay, so the bolus, that lumped up food that's propelled down the esophagus, it gets propelled down the esophagus using waves of muscle contractions. So the muscles squeeze together, and that continues to push that lump of food, the bolus, down the esophagus. And this process is called peristalsis. Peristalsis is involuntary, and it's caused by the parasympathetic nervous system rather than gravity. So to sum up, mastication, which is just chewing, forms a bolus, the lumped up food, in your mouth, which is swallowed. And after deglutition, the bolus moves past the epiglottis and down the esophagus by an involuntary contraction or sets of contractions called peristalsis.